Whoa, whoa. Look at me go. Chat. Two days in a row. I'm really turning a new leaf here. All right, I got to brush up on where we left off. So we talked about Meher Shalal Hashbaz. I'd like to hear how that's really pronounced, because I know that's not it. But it's like Speedy the Spoil, Hasten the Spoil, Speedy the Plunder, or whatever. Basically, devastation is going to happen, and it's going to happen really, really fast. And it kind of implies that it's like an invasion of some sort, which is kind of like it would imply. I feel like Meher Shalal Hashbaz implies that destruction comes not necessarily from natural disasters. Not that natural disasters won't have a big role in all of this as well, but just not for what we're talking about here. So we read about that, the waters of Shiloah, as to represent God's like quiet and inconspicuous and humble ways, trusting in that over our political leaders, Rezin and Ramalia's son. Okay, and then we associate yourselves. Okay, and then we talked about, say ye not a confederacy. So we talked about Isaiah not threatened at all by all the political alliances the world can muster up, because God is going to beat them all. And to not worry about the confederacies. And that was kind of an interesting thing to me, is Isaiah saying, not that conspiracies aren't true, not that the conspiracies aren't happening, but to not fear them, to not drive yourself mad over them, to not cry out conspiracies like the people are doing. And that the Lord of hosts would be a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense for the house of Israel. Not the people outside it, but the people inside it. Many of them shall be broken, or shall stumble and fall, and bind up the testimony. So write it down. That's what we read on at verse 1. Take thee a great roll, a great scroll, write down the prophecies, because when they happen, everybody's going to try to say that the prophecies were not written down, and yet they were. Wizards that peep and mutter, people turning to mediums and sorceries, otherworldly powers, rather than seeking God. And what were these last ones? They shall pass through it hardly be stead and hungry. That when the devastation occurs, that everybody that survives, everybody that's left, will be left hungry and really just angry, cursing their king and their God. And then they shall look down as well to the earth, trouble and darkness. So just not a good scene for those that trusted in man and the ways of man. So, and it looks like we're still going. Doesn't look like we're moving audiences or moving sermons here. So this is a continuation of the last, 2 chapters now, I think. Isaiah speaks messianically. The people in darkness will see a great light. Unto us a child is born. He will be the Prince of Peace and will reign on David's throne. So more prophecy of the Savior. Ooh, okay. Nevertheless, the dimness shall not be such as was in her vexation, when at first he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterwards did more grievously affect by the way of the Red Sea beyond Jordan in Galilee of the nations. So Zebulun and Naphtali are two of the 12 tribes of Israel. I believe they're both in the northern kingdom. So what is he saying here? The dimness. He talks about darkness down here, dimness of anguish. So in order to know the subject of verse 1 here, you'd have to go back to verse 22 here. And they shall look unto the earth and behold trouble and darkness, dimness of anguish, and shall be driven to darkness. Nevertheless, however, the dimness shall not be such as was in her vexation. That phrase is confusing me. When at first he lightly afflicted the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterwards did more grievously afflict by the way of the Red Sea beyond Jordan in Galilee of the nations. So he's talking about, like, I don't know which order or how this works chronologically, but he's speaking of different levels of this darkness and dimness, comparing it to when he first lightly afflicted Zebulun and Naphtali, and then afterwards did more grievously afflict by the way of the Red Sea beyond Jordan. So I want to get some clarification on that. Isaiah 9. In Isaiah 9:1. Seems like Isaiah is continuing to speak of the dimness mentioned in the last verse of the previous chapter. He then, I think he then compares I'm not sure what he means by, what is it, the day of their vexation? By just vexation. I should say, I'm not sure what he's referring to when he says vexation. but it seems like he's talking about two different levels of dimness. One exhibited with, well, one referring to something that happened with Zebulun and Naphtali, and the other referring to something that happened with I want to say it's the Exodus through the Red Sea. Afflict by the way of the Red Sea beyond Jordan. Beyond Jordan in Galilee. Okay, I actually have no idea. Something that happened beyond Jordan. Okay. You're reading the transition correctly. Isaiah 9:1 is directly connected to the darkness at the end of Isaiah 8. In other words, the darkness I've just described is not the end of the story. Yikes. Okay. The verse is notoriously difficult to translate, and many modern translations render it differently. Oh, this verse is notoriously difficult to translate? That's too bad. The basic idea is that Isaiah compares a former humiliation with a future glory. The vexation, the word means something like affliction, distress, humiliation, oppression. Isaiah is referring to times when parts of Israel suffered under foreign domination. Yikes. That does not sound pleasant. Why mention Zebulun and Naphtali? These were two of the northern tribes of Israel. They occupied the northernmost part of the land, making them the first Israelites exposed to invasions from the north. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Historically, when the Assyrian, which is Assyria, is north of them. Northeast-ish, I think. Historically, when the Assyrians began conquering the northern kingdom, Zebulun and Naphtali were among the first regions to be struck. Isaiah is likely referring to that earlier humiliation. God first allowed these northern territories to be brought low. And what about beyond Jordan? Hang on. And afterward did more grievously afflict her by the way of the sea beyond Jordan, in Galilee of the nations. These are not necessarily three separate places. They are overlapping descriptions of the northern region. Okay, first of all, it says the Red Sea here. Does it not say that in the Bible? Let's find out. It does not say that in the Bible. It just says sea. So from the Book of Mormon, we know which sea exactly we're talking about here. And afterwards, so it's after the vexation to Zebulun and Naphtali. So it's actually not referring to the Exodus, because the Exodus was long before it was long before the two tribes, the two kingdoms were established. Afterwards did more grievously afflict by the way of the Red Sea beyond Jordan in Galilee of the nations. By the way of the Red Sea beyond Jordan in Galilee of the nations. Interesting. Okay. These are not necessarily three separate places. They're overlapping descriptions of the northern region. Way of the Sea, or in our case, the Red Sea, a major international trade route. Galilee, northern Israel, beyond Jordan, territories associated with the Jordan region. Okay, where is Jordan? Like, Galilee's all the way up here. And the Jordan empties into the Sea of Galilee, it looks like. And it runs from the Dead Sea? Huh? It runs from the Dead Sea to the Sea of Galilee. So why are we talking about the Red Sea? Oh, wait, the Jordan keeps going. Wait, what? The Jordan River? Okay, I didn't know that. The Jordan River goes through the Sea of Galilee. Oh, wait, no, wait. Nope, I'm tripping again. What is this? Just a pond? I don't know. Why are we talking about the Red Sea? Afflict by the way of the Red Sea beyond Jordan in Galilee of the nations. I wonder if it's talking about like the whole northern kingdom. From the Red Sea to beyond Jordan, I feel like is like the whole freaking... I don't know. Maybe it's not that important. Let's see. The point is that the whole northern area became exposed to foreign influence and conquest. Okay. So that, I mean, that's kind of where I was going with that. 2 levels of dimness. I think you're on to something. Oh, wow. Thanks, ChatGPT. Isaiah appears to contrast the first affliction, the earlier humiliation of Zebulun and Naphtali, the greater affliction, the broader devastation that spread through the northern territories as Assyria expanded. So there is a progression. Initial judgment on the northern tribes, more extensive judgment throughout the region. Why bring this up? Because verse 2 immediately reverses the picture. ChatGPT always jumps ahead of me, dude. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined. So I wonder if it's the same people that walked in darkness. We have heard reference. We have already heard of these people. I remember this because it very much impacted me, because I feel like I am currently walking in darkness in the context that Isaiah says that in. If we will go back to chapter... Oh man, we got to go all the way back to Jacob's words. Chapter 7, yeah. Who is among you that feareth the Lord, that obey the voice of his servant, that walketh in darkness and hath no light? I mean, I feel like that's a direct reference. The people that walked in darkness have now seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death. Now that, I don't know. Like, what? Upon them hath the light shined. Okay. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. Isaiah intentionally begins with the region that suffered first and most severely. His point is the very lands that first experienced the darkness will be among the first to see the light. I gotta remember that, dude. The very lands that first experienced the darkness will be among the first to see the light. The first shall be last, the last shall be first. This becomes especially significant in the New Testament. Jesus Christ begins much of his public ministry in the region of Galilee. Jesus Christ begins much of his public ministry in the region of Galilee. That's true. Gospel of Matthew specifically quotes Isaiah 9:1 and 2 and applies it to Christ's ministry in Galilee. Okay. So Isaiah's flow is darkness and anguish, historical affliction of Zebulun and Naphtali, a future great light arising in that same region. See, dude, there are important parallels here with the American nation. The other promised land. The promised land for the house of Israel. The remarkable thing is that Isaiah chooses the very area that had been most humbled and afflicted as the place where hope first breaks through the darkness. So I have to assume that that's what the shadow of death means. But I kind of want to ask about that. Any reason, any particular reason he refers to these places as the shadow of death? Is much stronger. The phrase, the land of the shadow of death, is much stronger than simply a dark place. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined. The Hebrew word can mean either deep darkness or the shadow of death, as translated in the KJV. Both ideas point in the same direction. A darkness so profound that it feels like death itself. Very interesting. Why describe these regions that way? Why describe these regions that way? In the immediate context, Isaiah has just described invasion, oppression, fear, hunger, anguish, spiritual darkness. The people aren't merely confused. They are living under the threat of destruction and exile. For the northern tribes, especially Zebulun and Naphtali, this was quite literal. Assyrian armies were coming, people were being killed, deported, or subjugated. The future of their nation seemed to be disappearing. So, shadow of death describes a condition where death and despair hang over the land like a dark cloud. Why not just say death? A shadow is interesting because it implies something is looming over you. Psalm 23, yes, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. The image is not necessarily being dead, but living under the constant presence and threat of death. There we go. That's the answer I'm looking for. Isaiah's audience would understand we are living in a land overshadowed by war, judgment, and hopelessness. Why is the phrase important? Because it makes the next statement astonishing. Upon them hath the light shined. It doesn't say the people in a slightly gloomy place saw some encouragement. He says the people living under the deepest darkness imaginable saw a great light. The greater the darkness, the more dramatic the light becomes. A possible connection to the Messiah. Okay. I think we kind of get the picture. Thou hast multiplied the nation and not increased. Thou hast multiplied the nation and not increased the joy. They joy before thee according to the joy in harvest, and as men rejoice when they divide, the spoil. Thou hast multiplied. Thou hast multiplied the nation. And this footnote, probably can't see it, says, it takes you to, when I click on multiplied, it goes to Isaiah 26:15 that says, Thou hast increased the nation, O Lord. Thou hast increased the nation. Thou art glorified. Thou hadst removed it far unto all the ends of the earth. A very curious phrase. Thou hast multiplied the nation. Thou is in the Lord, and not increased the joy. But he didn't increase the joy. Why? The word not should be removed. Oh, I'm reading I'm reading Isaiah 9. Hold on a minute. Oh. Verse 3 actually says, Thou hast multiplied the nation and increased the joy. Isaiah 9 says, not increase the joy. Whoa. Thou hast multiplied the nation and increased the joy. They joy before thee according to the joy in harvest, and as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. So this great light and the nation has multiplied. Increase the joy. For thou hast broken the yoke of his burden, and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor. I.e., Israel. The nation mentioned in verse 3, right. And the staff of his shoulder, okay, thou hast multiplied the nation and increased the joy. Right. Just gives us verse 3 then. So his burden, meaning Israel's burden, and the staff of his shoulder, and the rod of his oppressor. For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise. For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise, and garments rolled in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. Okay. No idea what that scripture's talking about. Hang on just a second, though. I gotta... How to check some messages. Okay, every battle of the warrior. Okay. What does he mean about the battle of the warrior being confused with noise and garments rolled in blood and but then contrasts that with the burning of fuel of fire. You're asking about Isaiah 9:5, which sits right before the famous prophecy, unto us a child is born. Right, okay. I gotta switch these. I keep clicking on Isaiah 9. The verse is difficult because the Hebrew is somewhat obscure and translations vary, but the general idea becomes clearer in context. The contrast Isaiah's made. Isaiah has just spoken about oppression being broken, the yoke being removed, victory like the day of Midian, when God delivered Israel through Gideon. Then he contrasts ordinary wars with something different. So ordinary wars, every battle of the warrior. These battles involve marching armies, shouting and confusion, clashing weapons, blood-soaked uniforms. The imagery is chaotic and violent. What you would imagine every war that we've seen in history to be. In modern language, war is usually won through noisy, bloody combat. But this shall be, Isaiah says this coming deliverance will be different. The phrase burning and fuel of fire is often understood as referring to the aftermath of victory. Instead of continuing warfare, the military equipment itself becomes fuel. Think of it as the war is over, so the soldier's gear is thrown into the fire. Wait, what? For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise, and the garments rolled in blood. But this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. And we get a reference to this in Malachi 4:1. For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven. Jesus Christ himself quotes this in 3rd Nephi, by the way. Behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. So it's just like this burning. It's just like this. It's not we're Israel is freed from the burden and the oppressor, not through like this bloody warfare like we understand warfare to be, but through this burning and fuel of fire. Why does it fit the context? Isaiah is moving toward the reign of the promised ruler. For unto us is a child is born. The point is not merely that Israel wins another battle. The point is that a new kind of rule is coming. Instead of endless cycles of warfare, bloodshed, military struggle, the coming king brings peace. Notice how the prophecy concludes, of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, which is in verse 7. Old world, noise, blood, battle, new era under the promised king, weapons discarded, warfare ended, peace established. Some commentators think the fire itself represents God's judgment consuming the instruments of war. In that reading, Isaiah is saying the victory comes so completely from God that the weapons and garments of war are simply burned up. Either way, the emphasis is similar. The coming deliverance is not just another military victory won by human strength. How it fits Isaiah's broader theme. Throughout Isaiah, God repeatedly shows that Assyria is not ultimate. Alliances are not ultimate. Armies are not ultimate. The real solution comes through God's intervention and ultimately through the ruler introduced in verses 6 through 7. He is contrasting the ordinary way nations achieve victory with the peace-producing deliverance God is about to describe through the coming messianic king. Verse 6, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of government and peace there is no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom to order it, and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. And upon his kingdom to order it, and not to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Wait, what? The Lord sent his word unto Jacob, and it hath lighted upon Israel. And to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. What exactly is the zeal of the Lord? I can't type. Of hosts. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. After describing the future king's endless government and lasting peace, Isaiah asks, in effect, what guarantees this will actually happen? His answer is the zeal of the Lord. In modern English, zeal often means enthusiasm or eagerness, but the biblical idea is much stronger. It includes passionate commitment, intense devotion, burning determination, protective love, covenant faithfulness. The Hebrew word can describe the fervor of someone who will not allow something precious to be lost or destroyed. Zeal for what? In Isaiah 9, God's zeal is directed toward preserving his covenant promises. In Isaiah 9, God's zeal is directed toward preserving his covenant promises, establishing the throne of David, bringing justice and righteousness, accomplishing his redemptive plan. Isaiah is saying, this won't happen because human beings are capable enough to bring it about. It will happen because God is passionately committed to making it happen. A helpful analogy. Imagine a king who has made a solemn promise and is utterly determined to fill it no matter the cost. Isaiah is saying that God's commitment to his promises is infinitely greater than that. The future kingdom described in Isaiah 9 is not hanging on human effort. It rests on God's own determination. It rests on God's own determination. That's kind of a game changer for me right there. I got to think about that. Zeal can also involve judgment. For example, if something threatens his people, his covenant, his righteous rule, his zeal moves him to act. So zeal is not merely warm affection, it is active, powerful commitment. Why Lord of Hosts? The title Lord of Hosts emphasizes God's sovereignty over heavenly and earthly powers. The God who commands all the hosts of heaven and rules over nations is personally committed to bringing this about. Yeah, I always think that like when he refers to the Lord as the Lord of Hosts, that he's like putting emphasis on the fact that he's God of like not just the earth, but like literally everything, every being in the universe. Which I feel like has some kind of involvement with whatever he's referring to when he's talking about the Lord of Hosts. From an LDS perspective, Latter-day Saints often see this as applying not only to the coming of Jesus Christ, but also to the ultimate gathering of Israel and establishment of God's kingdom. The thought is the same. God's work succeeds not because human beings are perfect or powerful, but because God is unwaveringly committed to fulfilling his covenant purposes. So in simple terms, the zeal of the Lord of Hosts is God's intense, active, covenant-driven determination to accomplish his promises and establish his righteous kingdom, regardless of the obstacles that stand in the way. Okay. The Lord sent his word unto Jacob, and it hath lighted upon Israel. And all the people shall know, even Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, that say in the pride and stoutness of heart, the bricks are fallen down, but we will build with hewn stones. The sycamores are cut down, but we will change them into cedars. Therefore, the Lord shall set up the adversaries of Rezin against him and join his enemies together. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh, my gosh, dude. Every verse. Every verse, chat. We're determined, though, dude. We are determined. Okay. The Lord sent his word unto Jacob, and it hath lighted upon Israel. Is he saying he just delivered his word to Jacob, and Jacob delivered it to the rest of Israel? You mean by delivering his word to Jacob? And it lighted upon the house of Israel. What is the word, Isaiah? When God sends a word, he is sending a prophetic message, a decree, a warning of judgment. So Isaiah is saying God has spoken a message to his covenant people. This likely refers to the warnings Isaiah and other prophets had been giving. Why Jacob and Israel? Often in Isaiah, these names are used poetically for the covenant people as a whole, but here there may be a subtle distinction. Jacob can emphasize the nation descended from Jacob. Israel often points to the people as they actually exist in history, especially the northern kingdom. Sent his word unto Jacob, and it hath lighted upon Israel. The idea may be God sent his word to the covenant family, and that word has now reached or fallen upon Israel. Why is he saying this here? Lighted upon, KJV means something closer to landed upon, fell upon, came upon, took effect upon. Think of an arrow reaching its target. Isaiah is saying God's word has arrived and is taking effect. The warning is no longer merely spoken, its fulfillment is beginning. Why is that significant? The next verses show the people responding with pride. The bricks are fallen, but we will build with hewn stones. In other words, the judgment has already begun to strike, but instead of repenting, they respond with self-confidence. So verse 8 is almost an announcement. God's message has been delivered, and now its consequences are appearing in Israel. Judgment has already begun to strike, but instead of repenting, they respond with self-confidence. The bricks are fallen down, but we'll just build with hewn stones. Imagine a king issued a decree. The first decree is written and sent out. God sent a prophetic warning to his covenant people, and that warning has now come upon Israel in reality. The word is no longer merely spoken, it is beginning to be fulfilled. So under that context, we're building with hewn stones, and the sycamores are cut down, but we'll change them into cedars. And the Lord shall set up the adversaries of Rezin against him and join his enemies together, the Syrians before and the Philistines behind. And they shall devour Israel with open mouth. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. For the people turneth not unto him that smiteth them, neither do they seek the Lord of hosts. Therefore will the Lord cut off from Israel head and tail, branch and rush in one day. The ancient, he is the head, and the prophet that teacheth lies, he is the tail. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, we're going to get to that in a second, but I want to know... So the next few verses are saying he'll use the enemies of the target nations to, I don't know, to go against them. Yes, that's essentially the direction Isaiah is going, but with an important nuance. The pattern is God's judgment comes through historical enemies and surrounding powers, and the people respond with pride instead of repentance. Basic idea. After the word has lighted upon Israel, Isaiah says the people don't respond rightly. Then comes judgment in waves. They lose resources and stability. The bricks are falling down. Things are being, whatever this word is, likely from invasion or collapse. But instead of repenting, they say, we'll rebuild better ourselves. That's pride in the middle of judgment. God raises up external enemies. Therefore, the Lord shall set up the adversaries of Rezin against him, the Syrians before and the Philistines behind. So yes, this is exactly what you're noticing. God is stirring surrounding nations. Israel is being pressured from multiple directions. Rezin had been an enemy already, but now Isaiah's point is broader. The same geopolitical forces Israel has been entangled with will now turn and press against them. It's not just enemies attack enemies. It's more like God removes protection and allows the very powers Israel tried to navigate politically to become instruments of judgment. So Syria, once an enemy, now part of the judgment cycle. Philistines, pressure from another side. Assyria, the rising superpower behind it all. The deeper theme, self-made security collapses. Isaiah is building a constant argument. Israel rejects God's quiet provision. Shiloh, which we went over. They trust political alliances instead, blah, blah, blah. Why this matters in the flow of the chapter. Right after this section, Isaiah escalates. Leaders are cut off. The nation fragments internally. Judgment spreads like fire through briars. So verses 9 through 12 are the beginning of a larger breakdown. What did we just read? Yeah, so 13 through 16. For the people turneth not unto him that smiteth them, neither do they seek the Lord of hosts. Therefore the Lord will cut off from Israel head and tail, branch and rush in one day. The ancient, he is the head, and the prophet that teacheth lies, he is the tail. For the leaders of this people cause them to err. And they that are led of them are destroyed. And they that are led of them, the leaders, the people that are led by the leaders are destroyed. For the leaders of this people, thy princes are rebellious and companions of thieves. Every one loveth gifts and follow after rewards. They judge not the fatherless, neither doth the cause of the widow come unto them. Speak a little more to the head and the tail. If we're just talking about leaders, why make the analogy of a head and a tail? So you're right to notice he defines the metaphor immediately, and it's broader than just leaders versus followers. Because Isaiah is not only talking about rank, but about direction and influence. A body image does a few things a normal label, leaders and people, doesn't. It shows the whole system. It shows the whole system is corrupted. A body is meant to be unified. Head directs, body flows, tail follows behind. So when God says cut off the head and tail, he's saying, I'm dismantling the entire structure of guidance and deception. I'm dismantling the entire structure of guidance and deception, not just removing a few officials. Like, I'm telling you, dude, that sounds like a blackout. That sounds like extremely limited communication. It contrasts authority and imitation. Isaiah defines them: head, the ancient and honorable, respected elders, social elite, those who assumed to be wise and stable. Tail is the prophet that teaches lies, misleading spiritual voices, false prophets, those who follow along but actually drag people downward. So the image is intentional. Society is being led from both ends, by the respectable at the top and the deceptive at the bottom. And both are corrupt. Like, dude, are you kidding me? Bro. Bro. I'm telling you, man. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We are not where we think we are, dude. Why not just say leaders and false teachers? Because Isaiah is showing something deeper. A corrupt society has two kinds of influences. The head establishes what is honorable, respectable, and socially accepted. The tail reinforces it with religious or ideological deception. Together they form a reinforcing system. So the metaphor shows corruption isn't only in rulers or only in prophets. It's in the entire chain of influence. I want to cry, dude. Just everything that I have suspected and have questioned, it's being told to me right here. Is this just freaking insane confirmation bias? Or is this the reason that nobody freaking knows what Isaiah is talking about? Why the head and tail order matters. In Hebrew thought, head represents origin, authority, direction. Tail represents follow through, consequence, degeneration. So Isaiah is also saying God will remove both the source of guidance and the distorted echo of that guidance. Why pair it with branch and rush? I was curious about this phrase as well. That adds another layer. The branch is strong, visible, established growth. Rush is weak, low, swamp vegetation. So the structure is high status is the head and branch, low status, tail, rush. Meaning every level of society is included. Elite to marginal, respected to ignored. So true, dude. So freaking true. This isn't just political removal. It's the collapse of a society's ability to see clearly, speak truthfully, or be led rightly. When both honored leadership and guiding voices are corrupted, the whole body becomes directionless. It shows not just hierarchy, but directional influence across the whole society, from respected leaders to misleading voices, so that God's judgment is portrayed as the removal of the entire system of guidance, not just a few individuals. I don't know how much clearer it can be, dude. I'm just baffled. Therefore, that being said, the Lord shall have no joy in their young men, neither shall have mercy on their fatherless and widows. For every one of them is a hypocrite and an evildoer, and every mouth speaketh folly. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. For wickedness burneth as the fire. It shall devour the briars and thorns, and shall kindle in the thickets of the forests. And they shall mount up like the lifting up of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened. See, there it is again, dude, the Lord of hosts. And the people shall be as the fuel of the fire. No man shall spare his brother. And he shall snatch on the right hand and be hungry, and he shall eat on the left hand, and they shall not be satisfied. They shall eat every man the flesh of his own arm. Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim, Manasseh, they together shall be against Judah. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. That's just freaking insane, dude. I just... All right, I do want to know... So the wickedness burneth as fire. It devours the briars and thorns. Why does it say that the wickedness will be burning, in parentheses, and devouring like fire instead of burning up with fire? This is one of those places where the English phrasing can feel slightly off until you see the Hebrew idiom and the imagery Isaiah is building. So you're noticing a key tension. It sounds like wickedness is the fire doing the burning, not just being burned. The phrase is not primarily about punishment yet. It's about how sin behaves internally. Isaiah is saying wickedness doesn't just exist in people. It spreads like a consuming force. God lights a fire to punish So instead of God lights a fire to punish wickedness, it begins as wickedness itself operates like a fire. Okay, that makes sense. It devours the briars and thorns, and shall kindle in the thickets of the forests, and they shall mount up like the lifting up of smoke. That's the one that I don't... They shall mount up like the lifting up of smoke. What does that mean? It spreads quickly. It consumes everything around it. It escalates once it starts. Isaiah is doing a 2-stage image. Internal corruption. Wickedness is like fire. It spreads socially. Gossip, injustice, violence. It consumes relationships and institutions. It feeds on itself. The people become fuel for the fire. Now the metaphor flips. What they created becomes what consumes them. So it's not just punishment from outside. It's also self-destruction culminating in judgment. Again, dude, I get it. I see the vision. I just don't know. I still just don't know what I'm supposed to do about it, like right now. That's the freaking big question. The briars and thorns clue. Isaiah keeps using agricultural imagery. Briars and thorns, unchecked invasive growth. Fire clearing force that consumes it. So wickedness behaves like uncontrolled vegetation that eventually becomes fuel for a fire of judgment. That's why it's not phrased as simply they will be burned up. He shows the process, why this matters theologically. Modern analogy, why Isaiah phrases it this way. He shows moral decay has momentum. Judgment is both consequence and completion. The system collapses from within before it is fully consumed. And a short clarification on lifting up. On mounting up like the lifting up of smoke. The image is simple. Smoke rises upward. It is light, unstable, and uncontrolled. It has no direction of its own once the fire is set. So mounting up like smoke is Isaiah's way of saying the effects of wickedness and judgment will spread rapidly and uncontrollably beyond anyone's ability to stop or contain them. The emphasis, it's not about ascending in a positive sense. It's about instability, dispersal, uncontrollable spread, total loss of order. Isaiah is describing a society where wickedness spreads like fire, people become fuel, social bonds collapse. Social bonds collapse. No man shall spare his brother. So the smoke image fits the progression. Does no man shall spare his brother mean they won't associate with them anymore? Not exactly. Isaiah is describing a breakdown of society caused by judgment and internal collapse. The key idea is social bonds stop restraining behavior. So people don't just drift apart socially. They begin to act without normal limits of loyalty or compassion. Includes more than not associating. It involves a progression like breakdown of trust, loss of family loyalty, survival mentality taking over, people harming or exploiting each other. Next line makes it clearer. He shall snatch on the right hand and be hungry. That's not describing distance. It's describing mutual exploitation and desperation. So what is Isaiah saying? People will stop. He's not saying people will stop hanging out with their relatives. He's saying when judgment and chaos fully set in, even close relationships like brothers will no longer restrain selfish or destructive behavior. Like, could not we say that that's going on right now? Kinship no longer protects you. Social morality collapses. Even family ties don't prevent harm. It represents the strongest natural bond in human or in ancient society. Breaking that bond signals total breakdown of order. It's the most extreme way to say even the closest human relationships will not hold the society together anymore. Man. Just another freaking heavy chapter, dude. Another really freaking heavy chapter. And this one's a pretty lengthy one. So we will probably visit this one tomorrow. Hope you guys have a lot to think about now.